it's a relief kind of to have them in a place where that's safe and where they're going to be taken care of.
It was the summer of 2021 when COVID finally caught up to Nicole Riggs. The virus infected her family of 4 and both of her parents. As her mom and dad struggled, Riggs encouraged them to go to the hospital for help.
When does your opinion then change?
It happened pretty quick. We're thinking he's fatigued, but once he starts getting fluids, once he starts getting help, he's going to bounce back, and I don't know anyone that's been in the hospital longer than 2 or 3 days for something like that.
But Ralph Markson would never make it out of Abbott Northwestern in Minneapolis.
He had just turned 70 years old, not on any daily medications, walked long distances every day.
Riggs is the first to admit her dad was not vaccinated.
Both of his friends got vaccinated, and they both got vax-injured. And so he was adamant that he was not going to get the vaccine.
As she has spent more than a year poring over his medical records with outside doctors.
This whole stack right here is all the drugs that were administered during that time. It's over 50 medications during that time.
She believes the decision not to be did not play a role in his death.
When both my parents were in the hospital, my brother started a Caring Bridge page. They're saying, I didn't know your dad was in the hospital. Do you know about this? And I was like, they were sending me videos. My dad's old neurological chiropractor contacted me private message and said, don't let him get remdesivir. Don't let him get a vent. Here's how you can get an attorney. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do with that. I didn't understand at that time what was happening. I asked for vitamin C, vitamin D, we asked for zinc, we asked for ivermectin, and we asked for hydroxychloroquine.
Riggs says her requests were all refused.
They were talking about getting him on a ventilator, and he didn't want to do that. And the nurse's notes said basically that by that time he hadn't slept in 2 days. And he hadn't eaten anything by mouth for 5 days. So I felt like he got to the point where he literally felt like he had no choice. And he had to make that decision alone and afraid, hungry, tired. I don't believe that he died from COVID. I believe that he died from the hospital protocols that are put in place by the FDA and the NIH. And if he wouldn't have been treated that way, if he would have been treated like he had regular pneumonia, then he would be fine. He'd be here now. It's very unsettling to me that there's monetary incentives to put someone on a ventilator. There should be monetary incentive to not put someone on a ventilator so that they'll try everything to try and save them.
In a statement to Alpha News, a spokesperson for the hospital said Allina Health respects the privacy of its patients and is unable to comment on specific patient care. We have great confidence in the exceptional care our medical teams provide to our patients, which is administered according to evidence-based practices by our talented and compassionate care teams. Medical Justice MN is a group focused on preventing pandemic protocol profiteering.
If you look at remdesivir, it is the only emergency use authorized antiviral for COVID, and it's being administered to the exclusion of all others. There is documentation out there indicating that these hospitals are getting compensation for each higher level of care along that protocol: remdesivir, ICU, ventilator, and even death.
Andy Barnhart is a Minnesota paramedic and attorney who heard from families across the state with similar stories. So many, they now meet weekly to plan their next steps. In the case of Nicole Riggs' father, the final bill for his 16-day hospital stay totaled $1.2 million. A wrongful death lawsuit against a California hospital spells out a reimbursement of hundreds of thousands of dollars for such a stay.
To me, when I see that, honestly, Liz, I don't love the idea of spending my time involved in this terrible tragedy. I'd rather just mind my own business, but I can't just turn my back on this. I'm a lawyer. I guess I know why I'm a lawyer now. And I need to be available to help in whatever degree I can, because what's happening is wrong.
What do you say to those who think this has to be a crazy conspiracy theory? I mean, our hospitals are there to help.
Why are these hospitals moving to dismiss based on immunity rather than allowing these so-called conspiracy claims to see the light of day and actually go through the court system where discovery can be had and where people can ask these questions that have to be answered under oath.
A national coalition known as the former Feds group Freedom Foundation has documented hundreds of cases calling COVID care into question.
We don't know if these lawsuits will ultimately be successful. There's a lot of immunity that these hospitals claim to have. But one thing that we can do is we can expose these dark deeds, and we can do that through the courts, even if ultimately it's uncertain whether or not we'll prevail in the strict legal sense. We can at least still bring to light what happened.
At no point in time has dehydration and starvation ever been used as a treatment for anything.
A physician for nearly 40 years, Dr. Richard M. Fleming has been outspoken against hospital protocols that he says are not supported by science.
When we looked at our outcome data, and remdesivir was the first drug that was used, it worked 28.2% of the time. Again, if you're one of those 28.2%, you think it's gold, but the reality is we have a lot of very good drug options, and when people are not succeeding, for protocols to say, well, you can't do anything else, well, that's wrong. That's just clearly wrong. So, did they save anybody? I don't know, I guess 28.2%, but that means that 71.8% died. And they weren't given any other treatment, and I'm not sure how you consider that success.
And on the topic of ventilators, Dr. Fleming doesn't consider himself to be against the machines, but he says he is when it comes to COVID.
There were 3 major committees that wrote reports in the early 2000s, 2001 to 2003, 2004. And they literally said that if you have a patient that has fluid buildup in their lungs, which is one of the consequences of this disease, you have to give them half as much volume of air. It's called tidal volume each time you breathe for the patient, or you will cause more damage and you'll kill the person. And that's exactly what we saw happen.
Dr. Fleming authored the book, Is COVID-19 a Bioweapon? A Scientific and Forensic Investigation. He is also behind 10letters.org, a place where people can submit letters to their state attorney general to demand they convene a grand jury to bring criminal indictments.
I guess today was the day that President Biden decided that we were just going to arbitrarily end the emergency. We have an emergency in the United States that exists because science and medicine were hijacked. And the roles that people played got flipped on their heads. Physicians quit being physicians, I think, when hospitals started buying them. So in a large sense, part of this is on the medical community for everybody getting into a position where we were so easily manipulated. It's up to the rest of us to go after these criminals. And, that's what 10letters.org is about, because we need to do something to hold the criminals accountable and to send a very clear message that this type of abduction, hijacking of the medical and scientific system with the loss of so many lives is completely unacceptable.
That protocol is exactly what happened to their loved one, and their loved one died.
Marjorie Holston represented Annie Quiner last year after she sued Mercy Hospital in Coon Rapids to keep doctors from removing her husband's ventilator. Ultimately, Scott Quiner died after being transferred to a hospital in Texas.
From your legal perspective, explain that why these cases are so difficult to move forward, and especially in Minnesota.
There is a standard written, I call it the Fauci standard. You can call it the FDA standard, where we will not give ivermectin, we will not give hydroxychloroquine, we give only remdesivir, and that standard results in people dying. But in Minnesota, if you're going to bring a lawsuit, in order to show either wrongful death or negligence, you have to show, okay, there was a standard, they deviated from the standard, the deviation caused the death. Well, there was no deviation from the standard, and so no attorneys who litigate wrongful death are willing to touch this case.
So we're preparing to move my mom in.
The Riggs have rearranged their home for this unexpected chapter.
We've actually moved our boys out of their room into the living room, and we've separated the living room off So we've made this into a bedroom for them. This is the new reality, you know. If my dad weren't gone, this wouldn't be something that we'd be doing.
Still focused on fighting on to warn others.
We want the doctors to be treating people with things they know to work, and they're cheaper options. I know there are probably some really good nurses and some really good doctors, but I also think there are some doctors and nurses who are following certain protocols knowing that this isn't helping people.